The following episode of the SpongePod is brought to you by Tough Tavern. Timmy, would you call yourself a tough guy?
Not even remotely. I don't think so.
Not even remotely. Why do you say that?
Well, I've never been in like any sort of fight or any sort of altercation like that.
Okay. I don't know if that's a tough thing. That might be more of a mean thing. But anyway, if you were in danger, if say you got in said fight, and you're in danger of retaliation, would you want a bodyguard to kind of ensure your safety kind of moving forward?
Oh, yeah, I would definitely want one. I don't know if I could pay for one, but I would want one. Yeah, they can get kind of expensive,
especially making the money that we make on the SpongePod.
Right.
It would definitely be tough to pay for one. Well, let's try to improve that here by continuing in this ad. Well, if you're in need of some protection, make sure to check out the Tough Tavern. Not only is this a spot to check out if you're wanting to see if you're the toughest of the toughest, but at this location, you can actually find a bodyguard to help you protect yourself from potential threats such as the Tattletale Stranger.
Oh man, the Tattletale Stranger.
Totally.
I mean, I don't normally tell my friends, so I don't know that I need that help, but I'd be interested.
Well, you did say though that you're not a tough person, and I feel like normally not tough people are the people who kind of tattletale. They're the snitches.
That's
in
true.
The story.
It's a way to like cover your. I mean, I'd like to say that I wouldn't like snitch on my friends should it come up, but I mean, if I'm really in trouble, I probably would.
Yeah. As a person who has actually walked through your ceiling as a kid, I know that you didn't necessarily point the finger right to me. I can vouch that you're not much of a tattletale. I appreciate that, in you.
Yeah. I try, but I think if there was like real bodily harm that was going to come to me.
If somebody like got murdered in front of you, that's not even tattletaling. That's more or less like preserving yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just
so we can agree that tattletaling is bad, but check out the Tough Tavern for all your bodyguarding and tough taverning needs. Oh! And welcome to the SpongePod, the official, unofficial podcast of SpongeBob SquarePants, where we overanalyze every single episode and we get down to the bikini bottom of your fan theories. I'm your host and in-house SpongeBob expert, Eric. Are you ready, Tim?
Aye, Captain.
Oh, Tim, it sounded like you're kind of sad. Are you not as happy today that we're talking about SpongeBob? What's up, buddy?
I mean, I'm good. I really like this episode, but I just gotta, I think my filters must be off
your filter,
somewhat.
That you need to get the sad filter off. You need to turn that happy filter on. We needed the first mate to really come through on this one. This one's a good episode, folks. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Tim. Are you ready?
Aye, Captain.
Okay, good. How are you doing, man?
Doing good.
Doing good. Happy President's Day.
Thank you.
Happy President's Day. Yeah.
Thank you. I love the presidents.
You do. You are.
I don't know.
You are a president's person.
I'm a president's person. Yes, I would say that.
Yeah. Who's your favorite president? Would you say?
Oh man, so many options. 54 to be exact. Or 45 to be exact.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with. I'll say Franklin Delano Roosevelt is my favorite president.
Okay.
That's what I'm going with.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go with, I don't know. I'm looking at a list of weird presidents. So I'm not as knowing about the presidents. I just see one right here that says Jimmy Carter saw a UFO. So
really?
Right off the bat, I'm just going to say Jimmy Carter. I really don't know much about him. But there you go. Jimmy Carter, he saw a UFO. Abe Lincoln was pretty cool, too. It says here that Abraham Lincoln was a licensed bartender. That sounds pretty interesting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm looking through all these. Anyway, we're not the President's Podcast. This is definitely the SpongePod. Thanks for checking us out. I just kind of want to start off this episode. So today we are going through Boating School, which is the 8th episode of SpongeBob. Just a classic episode. We introduce Miss Puff And today we are talking with Andy Clark as well. We're talking teaching with Andy Clark. And I also want to mention that you want to stay tuned for next week. Next week, we're going to have a pretty big reveal, a pretty big surprise on the SpongePod feed. So you're going to want to make sure you check out and tell all your friends about the SpongePod. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter. Email us any questions that you have. You're going to be able to see all the news pretty fast coming from those places. But to get right into the episode, I just kind of want to share an experience about parallel parking that I had when I was taking my driver's exam. This episode, of course, is when SpongeBob kind of goes through boating school. And it brought me back to my time as an adolescent, kind of going through my own driving instruction. Did you go through like a driving school, Tim?
I did. Did we both go through the one at school, at high school?
No, I didn't go through the one at high school.
Oh, really?
My parents
I didn't know that.
Paid extra money to make sure that I was a good driver. And I went to a really nice one. And so the day that I took my test, I got a 95% on my like written exam, which is probably better than I had ever scored on any single test in the history of test taking. Yeah. And it was really interesting because, I was kind of going into my driving exam with a clear amount of confidence. And all of a sudden we get to the parallel parking part of the test. And it was very interesting because not only did I do this so poorly that I definitely failed the exam, I actually tapped the car like that I was up against, if that makes sense. Like the car in front of me, like I tapped it. And
I did that too.
Yeah. And it wasn't like no, I didn't know that at all. It's amazing that I brought it up talking to you, but no, I tapped this car and by no means was this just a tap. It was like, I really tapped it. And it was funny because the driver, teacher person, kind of said like, well, that, you can't pass if you hit the car, if you hit another car. And I was like, well, that's not my first thought. My first thought is I kind of just got in an accident, I gotta leave a note, right? Because this person probably is gonna maybe notices the dent in his car, but I don't know how long ago this was, or if I'm like exempt from the law. But the teacher was like, "No, we're fine. Just keep driving." And like we just drove off into the sunset, and I don't even know like if. I hope the statute of limitations is up from that because I just admitted to it online, that I totally did a hit and run. But in all reality, I didn't even have my license yet. I think the driving instructor is probably more liable than the student. I mean, what do you think, Tim?
Maybe too lax with you. I would have stopped and looked at it and
as like an example. But what was your experience? So did you tap the car hard?
No, you know what's funny? I actually tapped the trailer hitch.
Oh,
it was a truck with a trailer hitch on it, and I tapped the trailer hitch, so it wasn't that bad. And I remember I barely tapped it, and they're like, "Well, you fail." And
you fast, right? Yeah, you failed, right?
Yeah, immediately.
Yeah. Anyway, so all that to be said, I think this is a goofy episode of SpongeBob dealing with his boating exam. But, as you see, your two beloved podcasters obviously had issues with their own, driving exams. The driving exam is pretty difficult for any of you under the age that you could drive in your appropriate state. I hope you know that this is a funny episode, but by all means, there's truth and comedy in this one because that driving exam is pretty difficult. But with that being said, let's get into the SpongePod. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, definitely.
Let's do it. All right. So in the first act, SpongeBob starts his day determined as he's finally taking his boating exam. He rides his signature unicycle to school while singing the classic I'm Ready song, and upon arrival throws the said unicycle away, feeling oh so confident about his exam. From a distance, Miss Puff hears of SpongeBob arriving to the school and states out loud that she is not ready for our hero SpongeBob. Miss Puff starts the oral exam in which SpongeBob perfects with flying colors. Miss Puff then gets into the boat for the driving portion of the test, and the confidence of our hero SpongeBob goes completely away. SpongeBob, ridden with his nerves, drives the car straight into a nearby lighthouse, causing Miss Puff to puff up and our dear Sponge to fail the test. Now, is there anything that kind of stuck out to you in this opening section, Tim?
Yeah. definitely a lot about, SpongeBob's confidence. I think when you're taking
or lack thereof.
Right. I like thereof.
Yeah, for sure.
When you're taking any sort of test, it is important to, it's important to know your stuff, obviously, but there's an interesting like confidence element that happens. Actually, I'll go back to when so after I tapped that trailer hitch, I failed that exam, and then I actually failed my next driving exam because there was this mix up with paperwork, and I was really frustrated. I was frustrated going into the exam, or nervous, as SpongeBob probably was. And I failed that one so miserably. Like I ran over ran over a curb. I think I rolled a stop sign. It was like it was a mess, but it was because I was so nervous. So yeah, SpongeBob can get some confidence, which he does later in the episode.
Yeah, kind just of artificially. As a classic analysis, I'm going to take the other side of this equation. And as you knew me in high school, I was about the most confident little punk there was ever to be had in high school.
True.
And I got to say, I didn't do well on a single AP US history exam. With all that confidence and all that ability to be able to, hold my own in public and make videos for fun. I by no means was able to get through some of those exams. However, that was more of a written exam, and I guess confidence does matter for both, writing exams and driving exams. But yeah, I mean, you are definitely right. I definitely, got through high school with mostly confidence, not as much intellect. The thing that I pulled away from this is I got to ask myself, like, why is a pufferfish a driving instructor?
Right.
Because it just seems like it would only go bad, because every time that something unexpected happens, basically she puffs up into this big old, pufferfish, typical pufferfish. And it seems like that's a really painful state, which I think is very interesting, because a lot of times when you see videos of pufferfish, they usually just kind of puff up to swim, to kind of float around.
Yeah.
But obviously every time that she does it, it's much more of a painful situation for her. So what do you think? I mean, why would she go into, the profession of being a driving instructor?
Yeah, that's you're right. It's such a baffling question. I don't know if the pufferfish thing was more, if she could control it better, or if like it wasn't as sensitive, basically. Yeah, but then it would kind of make sense. But
it's basically like the job function. I mean, it's like a deaf person going into radio. You know what I mean? Like, it's definitely possible. Yeah. I'm not saying that it's, to ban all deaf people from radio, but it certainly would be difficult, and you're not necessarily working to your strengths in that regard. That's all I'm saying. And also kind of something that I took away from this is that he crashes into a lighthouse. I guess it kind of makes a little bit more sense, because they don't necessarily drive cars underwater, but now we're talking about boats underwater. They drive boats underwater. Like, that is just strange, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of weird, because obviously boats are mechanisms, to ride above water.
Right.
I guess now that I think about it, though, maybe these are like all the crashed boats. You know what I mean? Like all the sunken boats, and they sink, they go to the bottom, and then eventually some like car salesman type finds the boat, puts it on a lot, and that's how they have the same pushy car dealers, in Bikini Bottom. Maybe that's how it works.
Well, it's like it's almost like repo men, like, in up here we repo cars, and there are people who like salvage who salvage all of the boats.
Yeah,
that's their whole job, is to just attain boats, basically.
I wonder if on their like TV, if they have like a Pimp My Ride type show, where they can like pimp out their like boat, and they can like put all the different essential types. Type of things that you need in Bikini Bottom in your boat, all in one. All I'm saying is this is just an interesting kind of, a new add-on to this Bikini Bottom universe, that they in fact drive boats and that they have lighthouses underwater. And the other thing that I kind of want to address is, this is the first time that a background character gets hurt and they yell out, "My leg," and that's such a classic. It's such a classic Oh, it's like my favorite part of SpongeBob is like how many times that comes up, and it comes up for the first time in this episode. So we're going to have to come up with like a different, I'm going to play a sound. It's going to be in the edit. I can't play it in our recording, but there's going to be a my leg alert, and can you act surprised, Tim, just so we can, oh, wow, that sounds great.
Oh, every time. Oh,
yeah, you're going to have to act surprised. I'll tell you on the Google Doc because we cannot play those sounds for each other. Anyway, I mean, is that something that kind of stuck with you? The whole my leg sound.
Oh, I love the my leg. It's a little bit like, how in movies when you hear like the Wilhelm Scream?
Definitely.
And it's like the same thing. It's like,
It's the SpongeBob version of the Wilhelm Scream, which if you don't know what the Wilhelm Scream is, look it up. It's a funny instance. And after the first time you hear the Wilhelm Scream, like on purpose, you will never not hear it in a film. Yeah. It comes up in so many different movies, and you're always like, oh, that's the Wilhelm Scream. And it'll immediately take you away from whatever the story's doing. Just a good, funny thing that happens in the world of film. Anyway, pushing right into the second act, while SpongeBob lays depressed in his bed for failing his test, his best buddy Patrick Walkie Talkie's our hero and surprises the sad sponge with a goofy joke where he wears one of SpongeBob's actual square pants. SpongeBob relays his pain to his bud, but Patrick has the perfect solution. He jams a walkie-talkie into SpongeBob's head, thus acting as SpongeBob's brain during his boating exam. SpongeBob covers the silly antenna coming out of his head with a classic 10-gallon hat, and SpongeBob makes his way to his next test with a newfound confidence. Now, Tim, what jumped out to you in this part?
I actually have a fan theory from someone online, so
great.
I'll read it. And so the name of the user is DarkWebby2292 on Craigslist. He or she writes, "Here we see the writers of SpongeBob subversively supporting the practice of putting computer chips in everyone's heads. We see Patrick solve all of SpongeBob's issues by attempting to feed all of the correct information directly to his brain, as opposed to SpongeBob fixing his problems with hard work. This message will probably be altered by the Google machine." Oh, and then it just cuts. That's the end of the sentence. So
wonder if it got cut.
Pretty dicey there. Yeah. Pretty dicey.
Yeah. Wow. What do you think about that?
That's an interesting one. I mean, I think it goes to like any sort of technology. There are positives and minuses to them. For sure. I've had to try to, when I'm teaching, you try to make tests as like cheat proof as possible, for sure, so that kids can't just like pull out their phone and look up some information and get the right answer. So it's kind of similar.
Yeah, I kind of, the only reason I see against this is because he shoves a walkie-talkie in his head. Like I get like, and kind of the idea is that the chip is a much smaller, much easier to kind of conceal device. I guess this is kind of pro chip though. I mean, if you think about it, like what you would get from a chip, is kind of the outcome that we get here. SpongeBob's able to kind of cheat. But I want to, this kind of leads me to my idea. Like, I don't necessarily know that SpongeBob's problem here was his brain. Obviously he passes his oral exam extremely quickly. Like he rolls right through it before she's even able to list off the questions. He is responding, pretty well. I don't know if it's his brain that has the problem. I think it's his inability to perform. And that kind of reminds me of like when I was in high school and played football, like I feel like I knew where to be, I could always see the play coming, and I played on defense and I wasn't that good. So don't look this up or anything, but I felt like I was pretty good at being at the right place at the right time. It was just a problem of whether or not I could get my body to actually do the right thing. Like that was my problem. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily know that like having my, coach like walkie-talkie into my head like would have necessarily made that any better. You know what I mean? 'Cause in the actual scene of him driving, which is technically the next act, he says right, and SpongeBob rips the boat right. You know what I mean? And I'm not necessarily sure that like that's how that works, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's like know. He's not, normally in all other TV shows, when there's like this kind of like cheating thing happens, or it happens in like a spelling bee or whatever, it's because that person doesn't know how to spell the word. And so then they hear it in the ear and they just spell it. But here there's actual, like, it's not like Petra's controlling his movements as he's going. Like,
and even if, like,
I don't know.
Theoretically, if this was you, you know, if I knew that you failed your test so many times, if I had done the same type of thing and told you, hey, instead of like running over that curb that I can't see because I can't see out of your eyes, you know what I mean? Instead of like running over the curb, do you think you would have done that less? You know? No,
I don't think so. I think it would have just been, the same thing would have happened.
I don't know. That's why I'm a little skeptical of this scene. It's a funny idea for sure, but I don't know how practical it is. But then again, I'm sure you could say that with every single cartoon in the history of cartoons. So jumping right into the third act, SpongeBob, with Patrick walkie-talking in his brain, demonstrates growth to Miss Puff, who's very happy to see SpongeBob working at his skill of driving, not knowing that Patrick is completely helping him all along the way. SpongeBob gets further in the driving course than he ever has in his 37 previous attempts. And while Patrick is helping him make all the corrective decisions and avoiding crashing the boat, SpongeBob and Miss Puff make their way through a leisurely ride as SpongeBob is surely past driving school and now auditioning to be a stunt driver in the upcoming Zach Cooper film, when all of a sudden Miss Puff makes a joke about an antenna being in his head, and our chivalrous hero cannot take the guilt of cheating on his exam. SpongeBob confesses his crimes to his teacher, thus forgetting about the wheel and driving, and they ultimately crash the boat into the same lighthouse as before. Miss Puff blows up and is stuffed into an ambulance as our dear Sponge promises to be back next semester. SpongeBob, then melancholy about failing another exam, is reunited with his dear bike due to our buddy Gary, and SpongeBob then pedals off to the sunset, surely going to visit Miss Puff in the hospital. Now, Tim, there's so much in this scene. I just want to start off with something beforehand. Now, do you think that Patrick has his license? Because it seems very strange that Patrick would have his license, because pretty much the only time we ever see Patrick is when he's like eating something, or if he's like under his rock. You know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah. He's not driving a lot. I mean,
he doesn't like fit the profile of like the type of person that would have a license or a car. You know what I mean? He seems like a bus driver or a bus rider, or someone who doesn't have a job, who doesn't need to have a car, because having a car is pretty expensive, by all means. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing too, with like, not to like not derail the whole episode, but the whole, like, it kind of brings up the same question of like, why does SpongeBob even need a license?
He has a job. I guess he does walk to work, and he makes it big, joke of it. But I mean, in the episode, and if I forget if this is in the future, I don't think we've recorded this yet, but in the future we see SpongeBob's parents. You know what I mean? And so he has parents that he wants to go see. I'm sure Patrick has parents too. So
that's a good point.
But he has parents he wants to go see. He has a relationship possibly with Sandy. You know what I mean? He has a job to get to. I mean, he has all these different responsibilities. I could very well see not wanting to walk everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. But that does bring up then the point. There's no way that Patrick has his license. Like, why would he need it?
There's no way. And so why would he be the one to help SpongeBob in this situation? Because there's several times where SpongeBob says, I'm going to floor it. And instead of doing that, Patrick provides the perfect answer in that situation. Yeah. I don't know. Just seems kind of weird. Did you find anything about this episode?
Yeah. So this is another fan theory we got.
Awesome.
Coming at you. So this is from Alter Boy 2292. That's boy with an I.
Okay, good. Did you know that I was an altar boy, by the way?
I didn't know that.
Okay.
I could have maybe guessed, but I didn't know that actually.
We just so everyone knows, we are actual best friends. We're not just best friends on the SpongePod. We're actual best friends. And I didn't know if my best friend knew that about me or not. My wife didn't know that about me. I was actually an altar boy back in Catholic, in school. But anyway, continue with your fan theory.
Yeah, so this is from Alterboy 2292 on Archdiocese Daily writes, here we see a classic case of guilt taking control of someone emotionally and that having a physical effect on how they deal with their situations. Here we see how institutional guilt is the problem for anyone trying to make changes in their life and finding ways to grow.
Interesting.
Yeah, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, that's interesting. Coming from a Catholic background, I do deal with quite a bit of guilt and anxiety from my guilt. Not that I'm like inherently a bad person that has to be guilty about a whole lot, but I am guilty about like the random things. You know what I mean? Like, did I leave the door unlocked? And if the door is unlocked, what if somebody might come in and steal my puppies? You know what I mean? And that's like the irrational guilt that sometimes you feel in these situations. Now, I will say that SpongeBob's guilt is pretty merited, as he was cheating on an exam, and that is kind of substantial in terms of the bad things to do in life. For all you young ones who are still in school, don't cheat. Why would you cheat? That's not a good thing. So I guess it is kind of it's a good ethical thing, to have guilt in the back of your head. But I certainly think there are institutions that kind of drive it a little bit more, if that makes sense. I mean, do you deal with guilt quite often, Tim?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and that obviously is something that comes from like a lot of different places.
Yeah, you're definitely guilty about that dude you killed. Oh, shoot.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
I can't believe we said that.
The dude you killed on Grand Theft Auto. Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely not what happened.
Definitely the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it's weird to say that I'm guilty. Like I feel guilty because most of the things I feel guilty about are like, oh, well, I didn't read enough of my book today, or I didn't write enough today. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
or something like I get being guilty about like leaving the door open, because then that's, but you're guilty. You feel guilty like I don't know, like the person who's like putting the guilt on you, and I'm doing this like in air quotes, is like,
good Becky. For the visual viewers of the
really
SpongePod.
For our audio medium, I'm glad I did air quotes. But the person who you feel guilty, you don't feel guilty like to God that you left the back door open, but you do feel guilty to Becky because it potentially, endangers the safety. So
shouts out to that first draft pick, Becky. Yeah. So anyway, the last thing I got here is I guess the second to last thing. The second to last thing I have is that Patrick is the bad guy in this episode. I mean, isn't that interesting? Because normally it's like Squidward or like society in general or whatever. Yeah. But this episode, it's actually our best friend Patrick. He's kind of the bad influence, because I don't think SpongeBob would have done this if Patrick, being such a bad influence, would have done it for him. Yeah.
I mean, I think SpongeBob was
complicit,
very willing to just keep,
for sure.
He was willing, the 38th time, the 39th time, he was very willing, I think, to go back and do it each time. But then Patrick was like, you should do this instead.
Yeah, he was willing. He was like complicit in taking a shortcut, but he certainly, wasn't, he wasn't like the person who originally thought of the dirty deed. He was definitely someone who kind of went along with it. And I think the last thing I see here is we see Brotherhood in action. We all need a friend in tough times. And here we see Patrick be there for his buddy SpongeBob. And I just want to ask, even though cheating is ultimately bad, even Jesus had a committee of people around him. I got to ask you, Tim, as the first mate and my best friend, if I, in fact, needed to retake my driving exam, would you shove a walkie talkie into my head to help me pass that driving exam? Would you do that for me?
I would think about it.
You would think about it. Okay. Because I think on one side, you're cheating. On the other side, you might be potentially killing me, because I don't know that necessarily works for humans.
Yes, that is a good point. There are some technical aspects that we would have to work out there. In theory, though, I'm kind of, I guess part of it is like we talked about earlier. There's a futility to it where it's like, is this actually going to help?
For sure.
But I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
If I took the test and then I give you my study guide, I don't know. That's kind of lame.
Thanks, bud. Yeah, thanks for having such a juicy take on our entertainment podcasts, for sure. But with that being said, with such a great note to add on, let's hear a message from our trusty sponsors. following advertisement is brought to you by Palace of Pranks. Now, Tim, my friend, can you please open the link I just sent your phone?
Yeah. I got it right here. I'm looking at it right now.
So it's on the Palace of Pranks website. Now, can you please describe for the listeners what you're seeing in the video?
So the video says watch closely in the middle for 30 seconds. And then there's some swirly lines that go around in a circle. Okay.
All right. So right off the bat, is the video like making you comfortable? Are you feeling comfortable right now?
No, not particularly. It's a little unsettling. A
little unsettling. Tim, can I have control, please?
What control? What are you talking about?
Okay.
What do you mean control?
It just needs a few more minutes. Okay. Does it make you feel comfortable at this point? Like, are you feeling any better?
No, not particularly.
Okay,
still kind
Tim,
of
give me control.
You have control.
Okay. Now, Tim, snap your right fingers. Okay. All right. Now, Tim, I want you to go to the bank and withdraw $800 and then give it to your best friend in the world.
I will go to the bank and withdraw $800 and give it to my best friend in the world.
Okay. Go ahead and snap your fingers again. All right, Tim, go ahead and take control. You're released.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Sorry, what was this
what's
ad?
up, Tim? How you doing? We're in the middle of recording the SpongePod. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I must have just, I don't know, dozed off or something. Looked the other way. Tim, I don't know.
Give me just a quick assessment. I'm going to snap my right hand or my right fingers. Can you please let me know what the first thought that comes to your mind is?
I will give my best friend $800.
Oh man, what a goof. And I just want to make sure everyone knows that I got that goof at the Palace of Pranks. So if you want to prank your best friend and to manipulate him with weird science to give you free money with the snap of your fingers, make sure to check out the Palace of Pranks. What a prank. Did you really like that one, Tim?
I loved that prank.
All right, welcome back to the SpongePod. We're here with Andy Clark, one of my good friends from Asbury University, where I went to college. Andy, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. I'm doing pretty good. Just here on the SpongePod, of course. Andy, you're a teacher. Can you explain to the SpongePod audience what exactly it is that you teach and where you teach?
Okay. I am a high school teacher. I teach at Mason County High School in Maysville, Kentucky. I teach a few different classes. I teach Foundations of American Government. And I also teach another course called Humanities. And so a little bit of a few different subjects there.
Okay, great. Interesting. So yeah, here on the SpongePod, we like to get in depth on every single episode. And in this episode, we kind of see Miss Puff ineffectively teaching SpongeBob kind of the art of driving, right? Because he obviously has a very good head knowledge of how to drive, but he really struggles kind of making that work physically. So as a teacher, and you're also a basketball coach, is it effective to kind of have a bug in someone's ear, to feed them intellectual knowledge? Does that help them in any physical capacity? Like, for instance, if you were to have on your basketball team, if instead of, your players hitting free or missing free throws, if you were to put a little bug in their ear, would that help them shoot better? I mean, does that make sense?
Well, that's an interesting question. And, you have to let come at it from a basketball perspective. I think I'll come at it. You don't want to overload your athlete with just too much information.
Exactly.
He just needs to kind of, I can call out a play, but I'm not going to be yelling, just telling every single move to make. The coach's job, I think, is to put the player in the best position for him or her to succeed. We can call a play that we think will put them in that position, and then it's up to them to make adjustments.
Make that choice.
And so with as you said, this is more of a physical test that SpongeBob is having here. It also depends on the skill level. You know, SpongeBob's not the best driver in the world. You know, if I have, you know, if you have a basketball player or a student, someone who's just you know, they're very naturally talented. They're well prepared. You know, if they're a student, they studied, they're well prepared. Then I'd say less is more in terms of advice, coaching from the coach. You know, you've as long as they've prepared well, and as long as you know, they believe they have the ability to accomplish the goal, whether that be acing a history test or whether that be going by and, you know, driving past their man and then putting the ball in the basket. As long as, you know, if they're prepared and they're confident, then less is more.
Gotcha. Well, hey, you know, in terms of cheating on an exam, like what do you think as a teacher about cheating? Is it conducive for learning? I mean, does it kind of belittle the entire idea of the project? I mean, what do you think as a teacher?
I come at this two different ways. I think there's probably two different reasons why a student would cheat. And I think one's probably more common than the other. And just being in the classroom, I see more of one than the other, although I've seen some of both. The first reason would be they're unprepared or they're, you know, for lack of a better term, they're lazy. And they just kind of want to take the easy way out. It's very easy now for kids, especially like when they're outside of school with it. If it's homework, they can just, you know, take a picture and then just send it to their classmate. So that's one reason. And then I think another reason might be, and it's not as common, but I do think some students cheat because of this, is because they are perfectionists and they may be very well prepared. They may, but they may not feel that they are. You know, perfectionists, you know, they may not feel like they're ever prepared enough when in fact they are over prepared. So I don't think that's as common, but I do think that is another reason. So I think those are the two main reasons. Again, the primary one being just kind of taking the easy way out.
That makes a lot of sense. In our last question here, and thanks for joining us again, Andy. Really, we see SpongeBob is very passionate about driving. He's very interested in it. He knows a lot about it. What would you suggest to a student who's very passionate about something but doesn't necessarily come up in the skill department, if that makes sense? Yeah,
and let me make a point about that. I think that's a key there. That's a really good thing, a great characteristic of that SpongeBob has there. Being passionate about something. You know, he struggles with the test taking, but you know, the fact that, like you mentioned earlier, that he knows the information. He just is struggling during the actual test. Yeah, I see that in my classes. I think grades are important, but I don't think that I want them to learn skills, and I want them to learn skills and knowledge that they will be able to use later on in life, not just focus solely on the letter grade. So that's a little side note there. But yeah, to get back to your question, practice makes perfect. That's the advice I'd have for him. Just the only way he would get better, I think, would be to practice more. I mean, relating my own driving experience, the first time I drove, I was awful. My foot, I didn't have a steady foot there on the gas and the brakes, and I was very, I was with my mom, and I about broke her neck doing that. But but then as I was preparing more to take my permit and then do the driver's test, we practiced more, and I got much better. And so with SpongeBob, I would just say, he just got to practice more. I don't know if maybe Patrick would help him while he practiced. I don't think Mrs. Puff would want to be with him all the time.
She's not very receptive to that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Andy, thanks so much for chatting with us here on the SpongePod. Wish you many luck on your upcoming basketball games here. I hope you guys do well. But yeah, thanks for taking a minute out of your busy week and sitting down with us.
Well, thank you, Eric. It's good catching up, and thank you for asking me.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. That was Andy Clark here on the SpongePod. All right. Thanks so much to Andy Clark for joining us on the SpongePod. That was some great conversation about teaching, wasn't it, Tim?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the insight there.
For sure. So yeah, shout out to Andy Clark. This was a good episode of the SpongePod. I'm really happy that we're keeping this rolling.
Yeah. It's a good episode of SpongeBob too, so it makes us easier.
This whole first season is just full of them. I mean, looking at the Google spreadsheet, I mean, it just looks so good.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of good ones.
Data research is by Rose Dawson. Our associate producer is Jack Dawson. The creative producer is Cal Hockley. Our childcare producer is Christina Crosley. Office assistant is Zach Cooper. Audio engineer is Jessica Brummett. Music by DJ Eugene. And music and cover art by the man, the Milky, the Michael G. I'm so happy that we had another episode of SpongePod. I hope you guys are having a great Saturday. Tim, you having a good Saturday today?
I am having this is a great way to start a Saturday.
For sure.
No other way I'd want to.
Yeah, get some good old cartoons. Then you get the SpongePod. I just want to end on this. We will hunt them down because he can take it. Because he's not our hero. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector. A sponge, Bob. Come on, yeah. If you don't have the chills after that, I mean, you just are not human, right?
Yeah. I'm chilly over here.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to turn the heat on over here because I am quite chilly.
Yeah. No, I like that one a lot.